Welcome to Open Minds. I'm your host, Christopher Balkrin, and folks, I'll be honest with you. I've been a fan of Jordan Peterson for the better part of the past 10 years. I would argue that listening to some of his earlier interviews really pushed me to start the Open Minds podcast at a time where I was really worried whether or not I should do it or not. And the reason why is because a lot of what Peterson was saying was very refreshing. Strive for the ideal despite all the negativity around you. Go for the biggest goal possible and work towards it incrementally. Compare yourself not to, who you were 5 years ago, but who you were yesterday and try to be marginally better. I mean, these were just, again, these were so refreshing to hear because I hadn't heard it before. And I think Peterson's ability to bring out key teachings from the Bible and other Eastern religions have been very impactful, not only for myself, but a lot of people in Western pop culture as well, because for a long time, people have kind of turned their backs, or some people have turned their backs from religion and Christianity. And I think Peterson's ability to bring out some core teachings and apply that to our daily lives is in fact what makes his brand really engaging for some people. But I've noticed that his criticisms of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau veer into the personal and the negative and not striving for the ideal. And it's kind of this intersection many people are finding themselves at with Peterson, who has long ascribed for people to strive for the ideal. But when it comes to Justin Trudeau, Peterson himself doesn't do so. So to set the context, I'm going to play a clip from, I think, his 2016 interview with Dr. Oz, because I thought this was a kind of a great way of just understanding where Peterson was at and what he kind of says in his books.
I think in part because in our modern world, we don't like to acknowledge that kind of suffering can afflict us.
Mm-hmm.
We think something's wrong with us if we have that kind of suffering. So how is it productive to focus on suffering the way you do?
Well, there is something wrong with us if we're suffering, and there's something wrong with the world because it's an indication that things aren't set in the order they hypothetically could be set if there's undue suffering. And so that is a call to action, and it's a painful call to action, but it's a universal problem. Suffering is built into the structure of existence in some sense, and the fact that you're suffering doesn't mean that there's something isolated about you that's at fault, right? Which is an important. This is why the doctrine of original sin was actually quite useful, because everyone makes mistakes and everyone falls short of the glory of God.
Speak to original sin, if you don't mind. And this is again, all the monotheistic religions share this, but it exists in other traditions as well.
Well, it's a way of universalizing everyone's felt sense that they don't live up to their responsibility properly, because you're not all you could be. And unless you understand that that's everyone's problem, every single person has that issue, then it's easy to become discouraged and crushed by that. And the major advantage, I think, to making a case very strongly that one of the fundamental realities of life is its suffering is that it's actually a relief to people to hear that, because they suspect it. Well, they know it, but no one's forthright about it. It's like, yeah, life is suffering. Okay, fine. So where does that leave us? Well, here's where it leaves us. It turns out that even though life is suffering, if you're sufficiently courageous and forthright and honest, let's say, in your approach, and you don't shy away, what you'll find is that there's something within you that will respond to the challenge of suffering with the development of ability that will transcend the suffering. So the pessimism is, yeah, well, life is rife with problems at every level. But the upside is, if you turn and confront that voluntarily, that you'll find something in yourself that can develop and master that. And so the optimism is nested in the pessimism. And that's extremely helpful to people, especially people who are struggling, because they think, oh my God, life is so difficult. I don't know if I can stand this. There must be something wrong with me. Does anybody else feel this way? And you can say, yes, everyone feels that way at some time. But that's, and it is as bad as you think, but you're more than you think you are. You're more than you think you are. And
I think that's a great way. Again, the clip is great. The interview is great. I'll leave a link below. But the fact that the optimism is built within the pessimism, the structure of reality can be very overwhelming and negative, but they call something out within you to respond in a meaningful, positive way, I think has been one of the things that I've gravitated when it comes to Peterson's, especially his earlier interviews. They were very much similar along these themes. But when it came to Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, Peterson veers into the pessimism, and it really does shape his worldview. So if you were to just YouTube Jordan Peterson on Justin Trudeau, you get a lot of videos. Peterson says narcissist Trudeau has never said a true word. Trudeau is bad. Trudeau's a narcissist. Is Trudeau the son of Fidel Castro? I mean, that's done probably in jest. Seize the day to Canadian leaders. Trudeau takes down Canada. Trudeau, you weasel. There are a lot of videos negative that Peterson paints Trudeau in a very negative light. Now, I'm going to pause there. I think before we get to Trudeau and his policies, which I agree on the criticisms Peterson puts forward, there's the structure of reality that Peterson is missing in his criticism of Trudeau. Now, what do I mean by that? Obviously, Trudeau is putting forward policy that responds in some way to what some Canadians think. I personally think that a lot of these policies are a bit more extreme, or at least more leftist, and I disagree with many of them. But at the end of the day, it's not Trudeau sitting in the Prime Minister's office by himself cooking these policies up. He's clearly responding to a segment of our population that agrees with those things. So it's interesting to me that Peterson veers down a very negative view of Trudeau when enacting policy, because the structure is Trudeau is responding to a need within society that has not been filled, if that makes sense. So here's an example of Peterson in a recent podcast with Pints with Aquinas. He was recently on. It's a great interview writ large because he talks a lot about different topics. But here he is talking specifically about Justin Trudeau, and I want to share this with you.
You get in when you elect Peter Pan to be your leader. He's, I think he's an incompetent narcissist. I think every single word that Justin Trudeau says is a lie. I think every single gesture he makes is a lie. It's all performative. He was a drama teacher, part-time drama teacher. He was completely and utterly unqualified for the job. And he could have taken it and thought, well, I'm an idiot, but, I have a name and I could buckle down and learn. I could apprentice myself. I could surround myself with great people and I could grow into the job. But that isn't what he did. As soon as he got elected, he picked a cabinet that was half women, even though 25% of the elected officials were women. It's like, well, you didn't pick the best people then, buddy. It's 2015. It's time for half of the people to be women. That's the level of thinking he's capable of. And he's scuttled the Canadian economy. We're about as productive now as Mississippi. Right. We were at parity 10 years ago with the US. Our housing is twice as expensive. We have far more immigrants entering the country than you do with your open southern border. Right. We're slated to have the worst performing economy in the developing world for the next 30 years. He's scuttling the energy industry. He refused to deliver natural gas to the Germans and to the Japanese when they came cap in hand asking, and turned all that money over to the Middle Eastern tyrants and the Russians. Right. What else? He's produced the most totalitarian legislation that Canada has ever seen. He scuttled the Constitution. He stole Canadians' bank accounts during the trucker convoy and acted unconstitutionally, which the courts have already decided. His energy minister, Stephen Guilbeault, is a delusional, nature-worshipping activist and has been since he was 5 years old. He's at war with Alberta, which has like the third largest oil reserves in the world. Saskatchewan has the largest uranium reserves. Canada could be insanely wealthy if we weren't childish beyond belief.
So is public opinion turning on Trudeau?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's in all likelihood, he'll be scuttled. His party will be scuttled in the next election next October. But he'll hang on until October 25th because he's made a devil's deal with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the socialists, a man too stupid to even negotiate for a cabinet position despite having formed essentially a coalition, which is also unheard of in the Canadian political tradition. There's never been a coalition like this. And anybody with any sense who forms a coalition as a minority party leader gets a seat at the table. But Singh, he's a Rolex wearing, what would you say, tailored suit socialist. You know, I don't know what sort of creature that is. I have a Rolex and I wear tailored suits, but I'm no socialist.
Right.
So that was Peterson on Trudeau and the current NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Contrasting that to his interview with Dr. Oz back again in 2016, I think it was. To me, that analysis does not show that someone is striving for the ideal. That is someone who is dwelling into the pessimism that exists. By the way, let me just be very clear. I agree with the criticisms against Justin Trudeau's policies. I've well documented climate change, the trucker convoy. There were 257 bank accounts that were frozen. Scotiabank was the only bank that came out saying that this was wrong. They shouldn't have done it. I think they were the only bank that issued an apology. A federal court ruled that the Emergencies Act was unconstitutional or was not necessary, I think is the right terminology. Anyways, I agree with those criticisms, but in the conversation with Pints with Aquinas, Peterson does not offer any alternative, any solution, any incremental change that one would assume Peterson would ascribe to based on his earlier interviews and the books that he encourages others to on the same topic. And so that's my major issue with Peterson. I find that he's very much dwelling into the pessimism. He's very much in the structure of the reality and not coming forward with that thing inside that can respond positively to that structure of reality. He's very much dwelling in the negativity. I want to share this last clip from that conversation as well, which is it was pretty dicey as well. Let me see. This was posted on Twitter. I did not find it on
This thing is hell. It's like
on YouTube.
Have it your way, buddy. Can't you just, call the poor victims what they want? It's a byproduct of neural activity. It's why isn't your solar plexus conscious then? You can't have a wood burning fireplace. It's like,
So what
these bloody nature worshippers. Oh my, everything's coming to an end. We have to act like there's an emergency. We have to lock everything down. We have to take everything from everyone. Why? So I can be seen to be the savior of the planet. You have to use pronouns. It's like, fuck you, buddy.
Yeah.
Seriously. And you think.
So, despite all of that, I would actually encourage you to listen to the full interview because Peterson does cover a bunch of areas. But again, those comments to me remind me of someone who is dwelling in this structure of reality, who's not calling for the best, the ideal. And Peterson, perhaps in this instance and other instances, shows us how human he is, because there is something to be said by being that upset with the prime minister to air your concerns in such kind of like, vociferous ways. The last thing I'll say about all of this is Peterson uses very polarizing language. And okay, I'm going to put this out there because I think there's some merit to this. There's something to be said about going for the jugular when it comes to analysis, right? Like, so the more polarizing you are, the more polarizing your language is, chances are it's going to get picked up more. I mean, look what I've shared. I've shared very polarizing language that Peterson has used. And I'd like to think that Peterson really thinks this and it's not a sales pitch. I'd like to think that. But I also understand that there is a brand and there's a machine behind Jordan Peterson as well. And the more inflammatory the language, the more clicks it gets. And I think Peterson knows that the more solutions-oriented he is, the less likely it's going to get picked up, because people are more likely to dwell in the negativity. So that's a bit of a shock for a lot of people who have long ascribed to Peterson's earlier works where he tells us to strive for the ideal. So I'd like to think that Peterson isn't a salesperson in this case trying to sell us something. I'd like to think that he's just dwelling in the negativity. But a part of me does think there's a salesperson element to this, because he does know what he's doing, and he clearly knows how to get clicks and likes and shares and followers on social media. He's been doing it for almost 10 years now, and he's built quite the following. So what I think is the way forward, I don't know personally. I mean, again, I think that Peterson needs to focus more on accepting the structure of reality and posing forward solutions. Regardless of what happens in the next election, the next prime minister will have to deal with a lot of these issues and undo a lot of Trudeau's policies, which will not be easy. I fully expect that the segments of the population that have agreed with Trudeau will come out in full force and protest Pierre Poilievre if he is the next prime minister, and do more things to emphasize how their issues are not being examined enough. And so Peterson should respond meaningfully to that. And actually, I think Peterson's real power is through helping people understand the limits of some of these policies. And I think he's done that in the past, quite eloquently on some issues. But I think he needs to keep on that track. I really do. I think as tough as that can be, I think that would really serve his brand more purpose than these types of negative, pessimistic thoughts that are not striving to the ideal. But again, this is just me, armchair quarterback, looking at Peterson. But let me know what you think. Do you agree with this type of analysis? Do you think that do you see a shift from Peterson as well? Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and let me know what you think about Peterson's analysis of Trudeau. Again, I agree with a lot of the policy stuff. I just don't like this negative narcissism. It just doesn't serve our politics very well, and the polarizing language isn't good either. But let me know what you think in the comment section below.